There's a lot of tier lists and ranking videos on the many areas of Sonic. Except the storylines. Until now. We're going through all the 10 main 3D Sonic games from Adventure up to Forces, plus the storybook ones, and rank them all from worst to best. Some might be painfully obvious, and others might surprise you. Although Hedgehog games, racing spin-offs, and the Boom games won't be on the list because of consistency, I haven't played most of them, and since this video is already long enough as it is. No time to waste, let's get this show on the road. It should be fun. Maybe. Sonic Lost World is,
I've been dreaming about pounding his sorry blue butt!
It's something. Now, I've already talked about the story in my video about the 3DS version last year, and my opinions haven't really changed that much of it. The Deadly Six aren't that deadly, the world building is awkward, tonal conflicts feel forced and brushed away too quickly, and while Sonic and Eggman working together handled in a more unique way compared to previous times, it still could have been done better. Maybe have Eggman give input to the levels, or have them team up during the final boss. You know, something that Sonic Advance 3 did. Paraphrasing what I said last time, it feels like it's missing segments that could have easily backed up questionable moments. What did I say last time about the Tails arguing scene?
I trust you, Tails, it's just that...
No, you don't. You trust Eggman more.
I feel this conflict would work better if there was a cutscene in between where Tails comes up with a plan/calculation, Eggman corrects them and thinks of something better, which Sonic agrees with, surprising Tails and questioning Sonic's chemistry with Eggman and the Alliance.
Yeah, what he said. Like I said, there could have been more creative parts of them teaming up, but it just feels like a toned-down version of stuff Sonic Boom would do. Heck, even Sonic for Hire handles the concept of Sonic and Eggman having to team up in a more entertaining way than Lost World. Come to think of it, that show kinda did the whole frenemy aspect between Sonic and Eggman years before Boom did. Besides Eggman, most of the characters are just kinda irritating, and it just kinda lacks the charm of the previous stories, and feels more disconnected to the main series than Colors. Sonic's lines also come across being rather whiny at times. I haven't really hated Roger's portrayal of Sonic, but here it feels the most phoned in.
What were you thinking, Tails? You could have gotten yourself killed!
Which is unfortunate, since there have been times when he can do a good performance outside Boom. Even in Freeriders his lines didn't sound this off. Also, you know that meme that's like, everybody wants to park their car in the shade, but no one wants to plant a tree? These blocky trees are the ones nobody wants to plant. It's a story that feels like it had the least amount of communication between the writers and developers. Pontiff probably had no idea Wisp would return until later on, which is why there's no story mentions them. And likewise, the designers knew about Tails being captured and made into a robot, they easily would have made a boss fight out of it. And it could explain why Eggman being the final boss at the end feels more shoehorned in than other times. Amy and Knuckles don't really add much, the moral aspects are awkward, it's just not that good of a story. The only semi-noteworthy moments is the part where Sonic is alone and realizing what his actions have done to his friends, but it's brushed away too quickly. Also him roasting scene is funny too. I was way too casual talking about it last time, but now it's just one of those things where your opinion just gets worse and as time goes by.
That was cool. Pun entirely intended.
You stupid fuck.
Oh boy, here we go. Sonic Forces!
I want to keep a more open mind with Sonic Forces story, and while I don't really hate it as much, it is one that still feels more underwhelming. I really went back and forth in positioning this in 06, and while I enjoyed it a little more in terms of energy, it's still very flawed. Now the thing is, discussion with Sonic Forces has been done to death, to the point that there's almost nothing new I can add to discussion of it. So let's do a double boost and lightning round our way through the main problems. There, that's all of them. I just saved you 6 minutes worth of notes talking about the same material everyone else has said. But don't worry, I still have stuff to say about it. It's just a very average story full of missed potential. Sonic gets rescued way too quickly, and we could have had more parts to him as his own before reuniting with the Resistance. We could have had the Avatar speak and act more like a proper character. It says that they want to be like Sonic and looks up to him, so maybe have a part where he's nervous meeting him, or encourages Sonic after getting him back. The 6 months time skip is a bit too much, and if it was shortened to 3 it wouldn't really have changed anything. Why did everyone wait 6 months for the design to do something when Tails could have told everyone Sonic's been captured, and then they all storm Eggman's base? But then maybe Infinite could have had a barrier produced to prevent him from going any further. Actually, that's not a bad idea, why couldn't they have done something like that? Episode Shadow also could have added more too, and it feels like a last minute thing. I genuinely forgot that most of the story is told through text boxes on the level select like it's a code call. I know the series has had budget issues over the years, but they still could have made a better workaround of it. If I could give some pluses, I'd say the orchestral part of the cutscene soundtrack is alright. Everyone always talks about the techno music and the Avatar tracks, but listening to some of the tracks that play during the cutscenes at least filled with some adrenaline.
Oh, come on! You gotta admit this is cool!
And at least the Dafter elements are toned down and Infinite feels like a more opposing threat than Deadly Six. even though his backstory is a bit awkward.
I am not weak!
And at least there's more energy to most of the interactions. Say what you want about the dialogue, but I personally take these more energetic performances to the stiff 06 ones, to be honest. Having the rest of the cast helping out is also a plus, though maybe having them accompany on missions like in Shadow would have been cool. I should sound more mad at Forces, but everyone else has already made financial gain from ripping it apart, so there's almost no point. If they probably took guidance from older storylines, there could have been a lot more at the story, and it could have redeemed the game a bit more. There are 2 other games on this list that have mixed quality but are safe by their stories, so we could have had a similar situation to this.
What? They brought in middle-aged woman?
Sonic 06 is still not that good. There are some redeemable aspects, and I appreciate the cinematic scale, but judged on the original base game without mods, I can't enjoy all of it. There's a lot to unravel here, but I'm going to try and keep it brief. I say that, but this part of the video is about 2 pages long. Sonic's story is pretty basic like with Adventure 1, but unlike them, most of the time it's just really low energy with the character interactions. He just wants to rescue Elise for most of the story and nothing really else. There's only like one funnish interaction between the characters, but most times everyone just stands around and talks about what's currently happening like it's a Star Wars prequel.
2 characters explaining where they are and what they're doing. Characters coming up with a plan. Characters coming up with a plan. Characters coming up with a plan and meeting someone new. Characters making a deal and coming up with a plan. Characters talking about the plot and what's happening. Characters coming up with a plan.
The witness certain events happen, but they don't really acknowledge them later on. Like how come Sonic doesn't mention to Shadow about witnessing Mephis' plan? We don't need a cutscene about it, but if it was brought up during Flame Core, it would have added something. It could give a reason for why Shadow seems unfazed when Mephis shows up. Which I know could be due to the minimal facial expressions, but still. Sonic doesn't even question the concept of him causing a dystopian future. Brief mention of Elise. I know she has a few interesting moments in her backstory, but I really don't care too much about her. A lot of people say if she was a hedgehog it would improve her character, and while it would make this scene less creepy, it wouldn't really change her personality too much. It's like how people wanted human characters in Forces instead of the Anthros. Yes, it would fit the continuity better, but they would still be generic NPC characters. Knuckles also doesn't do anything worthwhile, and if you write him out, it wouldn't really change too much. I don't know, use the Master Emerald excuse for his absence. Silver's story is mostly whatever. Blaze doesn't really do too much until the end, and whole amnesia excuse Izuka mentioned how others don't recognize her is still ridiculous. Silver as a character don't really mind too much. I like his determination and optimism during the final story, something carried over the Forces. If it wasn't for his voice, infamous boss and gameplay issues, he probably would have been around more. One part I do find strange is how easy him and Sonic team up. Silver just goes, "Circumstances have changed. We gotta find the princess." And Sonic is like, I need to rescue the princess too. Let's team up. How come Sonic is so willing to team up with the guy that tried to kill him twice so quickly? It's different to SA2 or Lost World where Sonic felt he had no choice but to team with Eggman, but you'd think there'd be a little more tension. The stuff with Amy and Silver is fine, though this part here would have worked better if Dusty Desert was inhabited by people or took place back in the town. Did they even need to go to Dusty Desert? The part where Amy rescues Elise can be removed though, since she gets captured again immediately after. Yeah, it's a cute exchange, but removing this part changes nothing to the main story. Shadow's story is easily the most fleshed out and has some in-depth moments like Rouge's message to Shadow or that ending sequence. I used to be kind of put off by Shadow's more serious tone delivery compared to previous and later appearances, but looking back I guess it's important for the development of his character, overcoming his naiveness from the last game and embracing who he really is knowing the full story. Omega's voice is still off-putting, and years ago I didn't know the magazine term for guns, so I thought this line meant Omega was going to bring reading material with him. And the last story is fairly okay, besides the you-know-what scene and Mephis' cowardly way of killing Sonic. The way this is the only time him and Sonic share a scene is a bit unfortunate. Mephis himself is a divisive villain, and it would be too much to delve into right now, but I don't care too much for him. He pulls his don't ask questions card when Silver questions his plans, he could have warped the emeralds at any time, and he follows the Palpatine route of hiring a guy to kill someone when he could have done it on his own. Fans prefer him to Zavok or Lyric, but removing the part where he kills Sonic, what other main qualities does he have left beyond maybe power level? Especially with how Shadow sees through his bullshit early on. I mean, his aim is to have Sonic killed, and that would cause Elise to cry and release Iblis. So why not wait until she dies in Eggman's battleship, which would then cause Iblis to be free? Did you not look at the database and news report that said this event would happen? If not, then you're very lucky Eggman just so happened to be cruising around Soliana at the time. Judging Shadow's story individually does put it a bit higher than the next spot, but as a whole unified story it's not the same, and I don't have the energy to go into all the other chaotic plot holes since I'm sure most of you already know these areas already. I know it could have been amazing, and I'm sure there exists a full script that makes a story near the same tier as some of the others, but as it is right now I can't rank it higher. I feel with these two spots the positions would change over time. This is the more broken of the two, but at the same time the slightly more interesting, so for now it's just a smidge higher. But it's a very small smidge.
What kind of stories?
Oh no, no stories.
No stories?
I have so little to say about Generation's story that it hurts. It's still a decent game, has a fun concept, and is a great celebration of the 20th anniversary. But it has the shallowest story of this period. After Sonic and Tails meet the classic selves, nothing else really happens until the final battle. We get some fun interactions with the other characters, and the part where both Sonics chase the Emerald is cute, but that's really it. Which is unfortunate since there was potential for some clever callbacks. Like imagine having Sonic and Tails reminisce on events associated with certain levels, or have more interactions between the bosses. When Sonic fights Shadow, it could be a reenactment of their encounter from Final Rush. Maybe when they get to Rooftop Run, there could be a part where Sonic mentions how he became a werehog, which was a surprise classic. To be fair, I can kind of see why Sega didn't want to reference the other games too much at the time, since this was back when they were doing damage control in the series, and most likely wanted to avoid criticism with the story. Apparently the acknowledgement of 06 was considered a red flag for some back then. The stuff with the Eggman is fun at least, and in a way this is the first time he properly has the final boss under his control and not upstage him. I know some aren't happy about Eggman being the final boss for the past decade of games, but how most of the 2000s games involve Eggman being upstaged near the end, this was kind of more of a refreshing approach for the time. Emphasis on for the time. The final cutscene is alright and has some charming moments though.
Hey Sonic! Enjoy your future! It's gonna be great!
It has the missing scenes feeling that I mentioned with Lost World. Like, how come there's no cutscene where both Tails encounter each other? Or after they defeat the Time Eater, there could be a part where the arena is falling apart and they're like, we gotta get out of here quickly, before they return to the party. The fact that most of the segment is me coming up with ideas they could have had just shows how little there is to say about it. It's so basic even by this era's standards, and I feel they really could have played around with this concept more. That's about it. I think we can continue on.
Nothing personnel, kid.
This is a tough one. Shadow the Hedgehog is a bit of an awkward story, but also a so bad it's good kind of story. Much like Revenge of the Sith.
Applebees?
There are a lot of ridiculous moments that prevent it from being fully taken seriously. Most of the lines and interactions clash awkwardly with the stuff it's trying to say, but for the sake of things I'm going to be a little bit more critical. The idea of exploring Shadow's backstory and filling up any loose ends of SA2 is a good idea, but the way it incorporates it is the awkward part. The pure dark and semi-dark pathways are mostly the same kind of stuff. Plot elements get tossed around along with some of Shadow's memories, but most time it's just Black Doom going, Shadow, do evil thing. Humans were bad to you. And Shadow's like, okay. Black Doom is a bit of a nothing villain, and beyond him sharing the voice of Goku, there isn't too much to say about him. The android stuff is awkwardly handled, especially with how Eggman just keeps randomly lying to Shadow. It was still good to see it return from Heroes, but it still could have been handled a bit better. The semi-hero stuff is a bit more focused, but the Gun Commander subplot is rather awkward. He joined Gun to avenge Maria, yet how would he have not known that Gun were the ones that killed her? Wouldn't the blame be more towards Gerald? Wouldn't he have not known that Maria and Shadow had a good relationship? How is this the only time he and Shadow properly met? And one of them just ends on such a depressing note.
I've caused so much destruction. I should never have been created. This is who I am.
Now I know why people said that I was going to cry at the end. You were right!
Pure Hero levels are my favourite pathway, and it's the one that feels the closest to being canon. And it's also the one with the most memeable lines. I do like Sonic and Shadow's interactions, and Sonic's banter is a bit fun, if a bit sudden at times. Also, Sonic responded to some of Shadow's dark choices get a mention too.
Shadow, I can't let you go. Not like this. Why are you siding with them?
Also, depending on the pathway you can go, it can make the story have even less logic. For example, if you complete the Lethal Highway Hero mission, it leads to a cutscene where Shadow makes it clear he's against Black Doom. But if you complete the Circus Park Dark mission that involves Eggman, it leads you to Sky Troops, where Shadow's now on Black Doom's side out of nowhere. I know it would have been too much to map out story parts for all 324 pathways, but they still could have done more with it. Shadow's portrayal in the story is mostly okay. He doesn't really have the main edgy attributes that's usually associated with him. Yeah, there are some angsty rebellious moments, but it's not really in the same way he's portrayed by the outside public. Though there are a lot of times when he does come across as like a bumbling idiot. He just looks so confused in certain scenarios.
Am I an android too? Isn't that the doctor? Damn it. What does it all mean? Am I?
Yes.
What?
8 out of 10 endings pretty much have the exact same outcome. Shadow collects all 7 emeralds, and he goes,
finally, I've got all the Chaos Emeralds.
And then the character he just defeated is like, ah, Shadow, why would you do that? And Shadow's like, I am so powerful. This is who I am. And in the case of Eggman, he karate chops him to the face. More flashbacks and Maria details could have also helped too in order to fully flesh out Shadow's past. Seeing you team up with other characters and go on missions is cool, and like I said, it's similar to what Force has attempted to do. Though it is strange how Big the Cat doesn't show up. Would have been funny if one of the levels had you help Big find Froggy who has the emerald for the level. But despite everything, if you take the story less seriously, it can be a bit more fun. Like I said, there's just so much ridiculousness at times, and it feels like an unfinished first draft. It's a mess, but an almost ironic fun mess. There's a reason I made so many meme edits on it back in 2017, 2018. One other positive note I will give is that it does have some underrated themes, and moments like the message of moving away from the past is decent, despite being buried in the most parts. But the final cutscene is honestly one of my favourites in the series. I even prefer to Unleash's ending due to its simplicity. Yeah, the government ignores the fact that Gerald still caused havoc and nearly doomed them later on, but it's still a very peaceful ending to me. Also, the few CG cutscenes are well animated, with this being the first time they would start doing more detailed renders for characters. All in all, it's a jumbled mess, but like most other jumbled messes, it's a type you can still enjoy in areas. If to rank it more on comedy levels, it would be a bit higher despite its negative impact. Also, does anyone else find it strange how Shadow never holds a gun in any of the cutscenes despite it being the main selling point of the game? The best way to describe Sonic Color's story is that it's kind of like a filler arc. After the big story-focused arc of the previous seasons and the climactic finale, it's alright to start the next season with some more slower episodes to relax the viewer a little bit. Of course, not everyone likes filler, so I can see the problems.
Wisps with a W.
Yeah, I'll just stick with aliens if that's okay with everybody.
Who are you talking to?
To be fair, like with Generations, this was more in response to the stories at the time being a bit too much, so responding to that with something simpler isn't a bad thing for the time. I do like the interactions between Sonic and Tails, since in a way this is the first time it's just the two of them since most of Adventure 1. I know some might say Tails doesn't add much, you can write him out, Sonic doesn't need a translator, which is true, but in doing so you just simplify the story too much. The entire thing would still just be Sonic making jokes with no one to bounce it off of. The rest of the elements are fine for the time, and locations here are oozing with some personality, though it would be nice to fully explore some of the planets. I wish Hubbles wasn't on Sega's do not repeat areas for future games, just as long as it's the big empty one like 06 or too small like Generations. And I do wish no other Wisp boss from the DS version also appeared, since it would have added more tension. Some of Sonic's quips can be hit or miss, some of them work, others not quite, but it would have been cool if the bosses responded to some of his dialogue. Imagine if the boss of Aquarium Park was this Flying Dutchman-like character that sang sea shanties during the battle. Or better yet, have Cubot operate the robot since he has the pirate voice chip. I mean, Ken Potek wrote You Are a Pirate, so there could have been some clever stuff here. The final confrontation with Eggman is fine, along with the Wisp saving Sonic at the end, and at least it kinda knows when to be a bit more serious compared to Lost World. Though the Eggman moments do feel like a step down compared to Unleash's ones. And I can see why Orbot and Cubot's early banter can be off-putting to some.
Oh! I think I gloated so hard I pulled a muscle!
I don't need to have the other cast of characters show up like the DS version or have detailed lore on the Wisp species, but I guess just having more elements of flesh things out would have made some of the parts of this in line with the previous story. I was going to call Speak With Your Heart forgettable, but it isn't too bad despite not fully fitting with the narrative compared to Dear My Friend or Never Turn Back. Apparently it's meant to correlate with Sonic and Yakko's friendship, but we don't really get to see too much of it, so it doesn't have the same impact. Also, the full orchestral parts of the main theme are really magical sounding. It truly feels like a track you would hear in Disneyland. But of course, I must discuss the most controversial part of this game. A line that strikes fear into every fan on the internet. The Baldy Nose Hair line. I don't really mind it as much. It's just become a mostly tamish joke to me. But it's kind of annoying how it's the only thing that's ever really attached to this game nowadays. And the joke reappearing in Lost World and somehow Sonic Boom doesn't really help with that.
Which means we finally get a break from old Baldy McNosehair.
What did he say? What the fuck?
And it's even strange with how fans hate dialogue like this, yet stuff like taking candy from a baby gets a pass. This line is funnier, but you know for a fact if these two lines switched eras, where this was in the Adventure era, and this was said by current Shadow, the reactions would be completely different. If anything, if this line was said by someone else like Charmy, I don't think there'd be any complaints with it at all. In a way, Sonic Color's story was kinda on the same level as the first Cars. It's definitely not on the same league as some of the previous stuff, and the flaws are a bit more noticeable when you get older. But it still has a few funnish moments despite seeing how lighter toned Alienator is, and how some of the stuff introduced did kinda impact the direction of the franchise in a baddish way.
Time to take a piss.
It's never the best of the Pontaff writing,
but that's not saying much.
It's just unfortunate that you gave them limited material to work on or proper feedback. Apparently they had to rely on cutscene uploads online to know the characters. Could you imagine if they found the Witch Doctor AMV and based everyone's personalities around that? I wasn't going to mention the Japanese dubs, but I will mention it does make some of the interactions a bit more thought out. It's unfortunate the remaster won't have Roger record lines, since I assumed it would happen after he announced his return. I wasn't expecting rewrites, but the most a few redone cues to improve his delivery for certain lines, especially with how he's improved since then. If more fans were vocal about the writing after Lost World, Sega would have definitely changed the writing style in Time for Forces. But for now, Colour's story is passable. It still managed to carry some of the charm that Unleashed has despite the tone change, and still has a few goodish moments. I know I'm going to get some flack for putting the story above Shadows, but it's like Spider-Man 3 vs. Homecoming. In terms of unintentional comedy and replayability, then yes, this is better. But in terms of which has a bit of structured story, yeah, I'd have to give a point to this.
Looks like chaos has been waiting for us.
Sonic Adventure 1's story is rather fun. That's about it. I don't really have too much to say about each story. Each story is very straightforward. Sonic's story has him go after Eggman, and has some pretty fun interactions with all the other characters. It's not too complex, and has some fun moments, even if Ryan's voice acting needs a little bit of tuning. I like Amy and Tails' growth as they learn to be more independent without Sonic. And while I wasn't as overly attached to Gamma's story like many others, it's still a very solid emotional story with minimal words required. Knuckles' story is also alright too. I like Scott Dryer's line delivery, and the throwback of freeing Knuckles with him being tricked by Eggman, even if it's a bit predictable. Big the Cat's story is a story that exists. I never cared too much for Big, but there's sort of a charm to him. But something I think is worth noting is I believe Game Grumps are pretty much the main reason for Big's resurgence in popularity. Aaron having a breakdown whilst playing Big stages was what led to the mutual interactions with the social media pages in Sega, which would then have led Big to appearing in LEGO Dimensions, Sonic Dash, and Team Racing. Which is a good or bad thing depending on your opinion of Mr. Aaron Hansen. But the way all of them intertwine and are connected through chaos and Takal interactions makes it work more. The Eggman interactions are decent, Station Square is memorable, and each other location stands out. Also, apparently Casinopolis became the Riddler's hideout, so that's a thing. And again, you get some fun and unique interactions like Amy helping Gamma or Sonic helping Big. I don't really have too much to say about the flashback elements, other than to do a fine job of fleshing out the Echidna lore along with its themes. And it all leads up to a short but entertaining final story. The only minor parts would be some of the line deliveries, but this is the first time doing full cutscenes, so I'll let it slide. This one I have least to say because, like I said, it's just a fairly straightforward and to the point. It feels like classic era storylines brought into 3D, and it does so in a fairly solid way. I can't think of any other way to praise it like that.
Start, being my new hero. Hero?
Sonic Heroes is another story that I don't really have too much to really say. Like Sonic's story and adventure, each team story is fairly simple and doesn't really have an awful lot going on at the surface level. Team Sonic wants to stop Eggman's plans, Team Rose wants to find Sonic, Chocola, and Froggy, Team Dark wants to find Eggman, and the Chaotix need rent to pay Mr. Dickovic. Except the last one, they all achieved their goal, and that's really it for most of it. It still has a very minimal story like Generations, but it's still expanded on through the small character interactions during the stage, talking about the current situation, and encouraging others with the power of motivation and teamwork. I also like the dialogue they have before the start of each new area. Team Dark's story has some pretty interesting moments, despite the whole why didn't Rouge tell Shadow about his memories part, and has that mysterious cliffhanger. I sure hope the next game continues this debate about whether or not Shadow's an android in a satisfying way. I also kinda wish the level order changed for each character to reflect the story. Like, what if Rail Canyon was Team Sonic's first stage, since that would have been where they'd be running at the beginning? Or the Chaotix starting at Grand Metropolis, since that would be where the detective agency is located. I know this was done to allow for more creative level themes and fewer restrictions, but it's just a minor change that would make the game and story feel more connected. Also, Metal Sonic has a voice. I don't mind it honestly. I know actions speak louder, but it's kind of a unique add-on. And each of his transformations are rather menacing. And it all leads to one of the best fights in the series, with one of the best final boss teams. And the ending is easily the most cheerful one in the series. Everyone just continues on their merry ways to new adventures. I don't have a big analysis on it, it's just a fun, fairly solid story, and while it's not in my top 5, I can see why many rank Heroes as their favourite game in the entire series.
How should I start it? You like jazz?
So if you haven't noticed, Sonic Unleashed has gained a bit of a cult following in recent years. Especially on Twitter. And while it still has noticeable flaws, it's still nice to see some appreciation for it, as there are some really impressive elements to it. And the story's pretty alright too. Sonic Unleashed's story, I say, is the main middle ground between the two writing styles. Having the light-hearted comedic moments of the modern, mixed with the more bigger scale of the adventure ones. The real world-like locations are really beautiful even 13 years on, and the score is still memorable. The moments with the villagers are brief, but add some more depth to the towns. Professor Pickle is a pretty charming character too. Chip does lean more into comic relief, and I can see why some might pass him off as a scrappy dude-like character, but he still has some fun moments. I'm one of the few people that was actually okay with his voice. This also the game that would fully embrace the more goofy side to Pollock Eggman, and the back and forth with him and SA55 are entertaining enough.
Our skill at self-aggrandizement is unparalleled. Silence! Snooze!
But at the same time, there are some shortcomings. The Hedgehog doesn't really feel like a big focus for the middle part of the story with how cutscenes take a step back during this area, and it would be nice to maybe have Sonic self-reflect in his form. I know a strong will of not losing himself makes the Hedgehog stand out compared to other versions of this trope, but they still could have done more with Sonic showing insecurity. There's the part where Amy doesn't recognize Sonic in his Hedgehog form and he mopes about it, and after saving Amy he quickly flies away to not let us see him, but then it's never brought up again. Why add moments of Sonic being sad if you're not going to do anything proper with it? There's dialogue prompt where Amy accepts Sonic's form, but come on, what's stopping him from having to play out a cutscene? Also some more Chip moments would have been nice. There are some cute moments like with the bonus shorts, but some dialogue during levels could have expanded their friendship more. Apparently Chip forgot his memory, but he somehow knows the instructions for playing the game. I can see why they didn't do it, since it would be hard for Chip to fully talk while blazing at high speeds, but for some of the night areas, or if there was some slower day segments, it could have worked. The one scene after Jungle Joyride when Chip gets his memories back is well structured, and if we had a few more moments with them beforehand, it would have made it just that little bit more. And I wish Empire City had a role in the story, since it's kind of more of a filler stage. The story does pick up again after Jungle Joyride, which does make up for it a bit. The story and presentation is easily the one that's close to feeling like a film, even having its own bonus short in its non-existent DVD release. If this was a film, 80% of the marketing would be based around Chip. The Dark Guy boss, while in gameplay is a bit rough, still has a pretty terrifying design, and has a fantastic build-up before Sonic goes super. I really love this part so much. And the final cutscene is rather peaceful too, before jumping into Endless Possibility. Again, it's a solid enough story, but if the middle part was fleshed out, it could have easily pushed it further. Which more or less reflects the game itself, really. But the stuff it gets right, like the world building and character interactions, is still some of the best on the series. There's another part of the story I think I'm forgetting to mention, but I can't put my finger on it. Oh well, I'm sure it wasn't too important. Okay, so I got the low-hanging fruits, the minimal but passable ones, the ones that regardless of quality are interesting to talk about, and now we have the big three. The stories that fans always rely on when it comes to good storytelling in the series, and the ones you already knew would be around the top spot.
Chaos. Swiss roll.
I've never had the biggest attachment to Sonic Adventure 2. My first playthrough was around this time 4 years ago, and I have the same opinion as a lot of fans. Sonic and Shadow stages are fun despite the sparse amount, mech levels are slow but playable, and the Emerald stages range from easy to how the hell do people prefer them to 2D sections. Also, I did not care for the Shadow Garden.
What?
But don't worry, I still like the story. From the opening of Sonic landing towards City Escape, to the chase through Green Forest, Shadow's memories of Maria, there's a lot of good stuff to this story. First off, this is one of the rare times where I'd say every character plays a major role. Other times there are characters that could be written out and wouldn't change the narrative, but here everyone has an equal importance to the story. 80% of Amy's dialogue is just her fussing about everyone leaving her behind, but she still has importance in helping Shadow for the last story, and with Eggman's deal. And while I prefer the more goofy side of Eggman, I do appreciate Dean Bristol's more sinister take. 06 excluded, this is the only time where he feels like an intimidating threat as seen with his broadcast and negotiating with the president. Also, he's doing the whole scheme without an army of robots. That's how confident he is with his plan. Like I said, it's still filled with iconic moments like Knuckles and Rouge's subplot, the Tails and Amy segments, the Terrier! And Shadow's arc and sacrifice is still very strong. Even though I already knew what would happen, it's still a very powerful moment. And then it has a final cutscene where everyone reflects on the events they've encountered. One very notable part being Eggman's line.
As a child, I looked up to my grandfather because of all the great things he accomplished in his life. He was my hero, and I wanted to be a great scientist like him. But did he really mean to destroy us?
There's something very striking about that line, with it showing a different perspective to Eggman. I'm content with this perspective not being brought up again, but just for this game it's a unique addition. In terms of major issues, I'd say the audio mixing is rather distracting. Everyone talks about the shuttle one where they talk over each other, but the worst I'd say is the one where Shadow confronts Rouge with flying the Freedom blasting over them.
Shadow, someone is trying to get out of Eclipse cannon. There's not much time left before the cannon fires again. Can you get over there?
If you want to live, leave the Chaos Emeralds where they are.
Also, there are the various plot holes, but unlike the lesser storylines, it isn't enough to break the story entirely. And looking back, it might have been wiser to wait a few more years until properly bringing Shadow back, as it would have made his return a bit more impactful. Imagine if he didn't show up in Heroes, and then the 15th anniversary comes around and Sega's like, boom, you're looking for this? Gerald is still a unique villain, especially how some parts aren't sugarcoated, like his descent into insanity and the fact that everyone witnesses his death through a firing squad. I don't have a lot to add that others haven't said before. You know it's good. In terms of ranking, it's still not my true favourite, as others I found myself a bit more invested in. But considering how the next two spots are more considered spin-offs, this would technically be the best of the main series. But regardless, Adventure 2 is another story that's still entertaining and smart.
There is no time. Your sword is enough.
Yeah, Sonic and the Black Knight is a pretty good story. You already knew that. What else can I say? The setup is a lot more in depth, the few cinematic cutscenes are well composed, and I really enjoy Sonic's arc and dedication to not giving up and doing the right thing. It balances his more helpful traits from Unleashed with his ready for anything approach to situations from the Adventure era. And like everyone says, Griffith was at his best with his delivery. You get these fun interactions with the Knights Round Table, even if one of them is a bit questionable.
Only death can remove this stain upon my honor!
I like the addition of how each one has been a rival to Sonic over the years. The moments with Caliburn are funny at times, and looking back, it's unique how him and Sonic don't get along right away, compared to Sonic's other one-off companions where they're instant buddies. Some of the brief character moments involving Tails named me rather good too, and this comic/storybook style could have worked well for times when they couldn't afford proper animated cutscenes like Team Racing or Free Riders. Sonic confronting Molina before the final boss is still one of my favourite moments in the series, with Sonic still fighting even if the odds are against him. This also accompanied with the back-to-back dialogue during the fight.
Why can you not understand how magnificent an everlasting kingdom would be?
What I can't understand is how you can call such a boring-sounding place magnificent.
This story and the world it created will come to an end. Is that what you wish?
Nah, it's not gonna end. My stories only end when I stop running.
It unintentionally has a sense of finality to the series, mainly due to being the last one with the 4Kids cast, last story by Maekawa, and last one with Crush 40 doing the main vocals until Team Racing. But there are a few rough moments that prevent it from the top spot. I wish there was more moments with the Knights of the Round Table, since they don't get to say or do too much after fighting them beyond the last few missions where you play as them. Maybe one more scene with Molina alone that adds a bit more to her and her plans. She's unique along with her motives, but there could have been a bit more since she dips out for the majority of the story until after the Percival fight. Even some more moments with King Arthur could be there to expand his character. Yes, he's a cop-out villain, but that doesn't mean he can't add some depth to him. Maybe have him show frustration at the Knights failing him and fiercely correcting any of their objections to show how corrupted he's become. Also, the ending is a bit abrupt. After Sonic's reveal to be the true King Arthur, the story just stops dead in its tracks. Of all the games, this is the one that would have benefited the most out of a post-game story. Maybe have more with Sonic taking on his role as king, or have him confront the Galahad. I found it strange how he appeared in the multiplayer and not the main campaign, since it would have given Silver Note a chance to win fans over. These are mostly oversights that don't ruin the story too much, and I still enjoy it, but expanding on some areas would have easily put this at the top spot. And of course, the Sonic's message to Molina: every world has its end, live life, you know how it goes. I still like this message. It's still one of the best in the series. And in a way, it's one that could apply to the changing way of the series, especially back then. But I do think the scene's popularity has become a bit oversaturated with its current status. Similar to how Up and Toy Story 3 are judged by their beginnings and endings, I feel a lot of the praise for the story is based solely on the weight of this moment. That's not an entirely bad thing, but I wish more people judged the entire story as a whole and talk about some of the other areas of note. Storylines in the series being judged solely on a singular cutscene or line is too frequent with the fandom, and I think that needs to change. Despite that, Black Knight is still an ethereal story, has some great aspects of what fans like about the characters, and of course, has that great score. Also, I made a video comparing a Steven Universe episode to this story, so that's another thing of note. These changed me a lot back then. I respect them. They're good. And now for the best Sonic storyline. In my opinion. I have to say that for legal reasons. I had a hard time choosing between the two storybook games. Black Knight has the more epic scale story, but Secret Rings has the more unique story. I strangely really like Secret Rings' story, and even if it isn't as grand scale as the other two, it still has some stuff that I find that's rather important. But I will admit some parts are ridiculous.
It might even open the gates of hell!
And compared to Black Knight, it does feel more like a fanfiction. Replace the Sonic characters with any other random franchise and you wouldn't really be able to tell the difference. Kind of a similar fault we would give the first movie. But for now, that doesn't matter. First off, this is why I'd say Jason Griffith really starts to improve his interpretation of Sonic. I say Unleashed, but some of his line delivery here is a huge step up from 06, especially how both are only a few months apart.
If you're gonna do that, can you at least wait until I'm done reading it first? Say what? I'm supposed to be a sacrifice? I didn't mean to leave you hanging earlier. You're not still mad at me, are you? Hey, quit staring. You're giving me the creeps. Shara, stop! You can't do this! Think about what will happen!
There are still those few rough moments.
I feel rage.
But I'd love to see someone perform 3D animatics of these deliveries, since I think they would turn out really expressive. This was the first of the Griffith era games I played, and it got me to warm up to his voice more and see more to it beyond the snarky brawl dialogue. Sonic and Shara also have a nice rapport. The dialogue in the first cutscene is honestly really great, and the banter they have during levels makes their chemistry work more. And it's sort of why I gravitate more towards their friendship than the one with Chip. We see Sonic comfort Shara, lets her open up in a non-forceful way, and even though a betrayal puts Sonic at harm, he doesn't let it sour their friendship and determination of getting her back. The few moments with the supporting cast are great, and the ones with Eggman and Knuckles are genuinely funny. Razor Jill is also a rather compelling villain with a more in-depth backstory. He feels like an intimidating threat when he shows up, especially with the feeling of time running out with Sonic's flame. Also, years ago made a shiny AMV centered around him, so there's that too. Also, the cutscene with Sonic outsmarts him is still amazing.
I told you, I'm not a rat! I'm a hedgehog!
Something I do think is worth noting is that this is kind of the first time since the classics that's just Sonic as the main focus. Other characters do appear, of course, but Sonic is front and center the whole time. Which could be kind of seen as a bad thing considering how this will be a main trend for the series from this point onwards. I mean, this game itself is just a prototype for the modern 3D boost gameplay, narrowing it down. You have this game to thank for 70% of the bosses from this point onwards having the exact same structure. The cutscene presentation is still nice, even if it does lack the expressiveness of Black Knight's. But some of the faces are still expressive. Applying a color filter does make it stand out more, but I know it isn't the same. Like Black Knight, the ending is abrupt, but it has a more conclusive feeling. The tissue part is ridiculous, but it still pays off from Sonic's first wish, and he still tried to comfort Shara. His promise was to make her happy by the end of this, and he kept it. And though it said Sonic disposed of a razor and went on more adventures before heading back to his own world, seeing Sonic say his goodbyes to Shara would have made this story just that little bit extra. A lot of people really like Chip's goodbye, and while more people prefer him to Shara, it would have made a lot more impactful seeing their farewell. Also, can we briefly talk about some of the music? The cutscene ones have a nice sense of mystery and emotion, but listen to some of the boss music. This is probably the most underrated soundtrack in the entire series, and this is coming from someone who can tolerate the game's controls. However, I'd say Worth a Chance, while an alright song, is the most forgettable credits theme for a Sonic game, even more than Light of Hope. But it's a story I enjoyed back then, and still willing to respect now. It's not the best, but it's my favourite. One reason I think is because of the Dark/Griffith era storylines is the one that's gushed about the least, and for that it makes it feel a bit more unique, and feels more like a hidden gem to me. Even though I admit the game itself is more flawed than I remember in comparison to most of the others. Also, Generation Story makes reference to it twice. That's more than Unleashed, mind you, so you can tell it has importance. Sonic's storylines can be a bit crazy at times, but can still manage to carry a lot of importance for the series, and in some cases carry the entire game. Many of them introduce characters that become iconic for the series and fan favourites, yet others have become more watered down and not as engaging as they once were. And while recent storylines don't offend me as much compared to the other average 20-something-year-old Sonic fan, it is due time that storylines should be the main focus of the series outside of the shows, comics, and movies. But those few older storylines still manage to carry some really important moments for the series, despite them still having their flaws. And they all manage to get something right. Even the bad ones. Also, in case I get any comments saying I'm adventure biased in relation to the positions, just know that I didn't get to play a majority of the series until a few years ago around the same time frame. Here's all the Sonic games I have and the year I first played them. I did plan a segment to talk about how Sega should and probably will approach storylines for the media, but it's kind of too early to tell with the next game, and I might save it for a future video depending how this does. For now, what I want is something that feels more engaging and understands what made the previous storyline so beloved, whilst revamping the minor parts that didn't. And with narrative in games being pushed just as much as the game itself, and potential changes with the writers, that could seem likely. I know everyone in the Pet Albatross still wants Ian Flynn to write for the games, and I'm open to that, but I'd also be welcome to some younger writers that are still knowledgeable of the series. They hired fans to make the games and music for them, so there's nothing stopping them from doing the same for the writing side. I hope you enjoyed this, as it was fun to put together and go into some of these stories with a more critical, yet slightly optimistic look. Even though some of the positions were predictable, I still want to discuss my own personal experience with this topic and bring something new to the table, especially with how cookie cutter and generic Sonic discussion has become over the past year and a half. Seriously, you guys call out Sonic Team for rehashing ideas from repetition, yet have you seen yourselves in the mirror? Something something, definition of insanity. Let me know what your thoughts are for some of these stories in this video. Maybe you now hate me for my opinions. That's usually what happens when people talk about Sonic online.
This is better, said Daisy.
Like I've said, these types of discussion videos come and go whenever I think of something worthwhile. I'm mostly proud of the final product, but it was more time consuming than the last few, which is why they might not come by too frequent. I know the ones already here aren't anything too grandiose, but if this is still enjoyed to an extent, I could attempt to do something more like this in the future. But for now, regularly expected videos should be floating around for the next while. I don't have anything like a Patreon, but sharing this video and anything else on the channel in general would be enough. I have no idea how this will do because I don't normally do videos this long. To quote Darman, "When you share my videos, you're helping to change lives too." Probably. Maybe. I felt I've improved since my last proper review, but I know there were some parts I could have elaborated on, so any is welcome. Encouragement is my budget. More clout equates to more content. That's my trade deal.
Only a small percentage of you are subscribed.
Shut up!
I recently made a 2-part Sonic 06 YTP that I'm proud of, and there's also the YTP collab you can enter that I mentioned at the beginning. The next video should be a Steven Universe YTP. It's been in the backlog since May, and now that all these bigger videos are out of the way, I can finally post it. But yeah, thank you for watching, and take care.